Good evening and welcome to St Mark's this Maundy Thursday. We've walked through quite a lot of Holy Week. There's still quite a bit to go. And this evening we focus on the Last Supper that Jesus would have shared with his friends in the run-up to those events that Steve so evocatively shared with us yesterday evening.
The day of the unleavened bread came. This was the day the Passover lambs had to be sacrificed. Jesus said to Peter and John, "Go and prepare the Passover meal for us to eat." They asked, "Where do you want us to prepare it?" Jesus said to them, "Listen, after you go into the city, you will see a man carrying a jar of water. Follow him into the house that he enters. Tell the person who owns that house, 'The teacher asks that you please show us the room where he and his followers may eat the Passover meal. Then he'll show you a large room upstairs. This room is ready for you. Prepare the Passover meal there." So Peter and John left. Everything happened as Jesus had said, so they prepared the Passover meal.
Hello! We're here and ready to share our Passover celebration with you. I hope that you're looking forward to this. This is slightly bizarre doing it on film, but we'll see how we go. We've got our setter plate all ready to go with the things on it that we need. If you're sharing in this with us with preparations that you've done, then feel free to do as we're doing as we go along, but feel free to eat as well. We've got some olives on the table, which we'll probably sit and nibble at as we go along. So feel free to make this a relaxed evening. Yeah, there we go, start on the olives. I'm actually going to begin by lighting 2 candles. At Passover we light 2 candles. One is to represent the light of Jesus in our own lives and in our households. And the second candle is to represent the light of Jesus in the world and in our community. So we waft it outwards. Jesus out there. I light the 2 Sabbath candles to remind us of the rest and freedom that God gives us. As I light them, we pray for more of Jesus' light in our lives and in our world. We bless you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has given us Jesus, the light of the world. Thank you that whoever follows you will never walk in darkness, but have the light of life. There's a special Passover greeting that we can share with each other, which is Shabbat Shalom, which means peaceful Sabbath. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
The Passover meal is, in many ways, a storytelling meal, all about the history of God's people. And so it begins by recalling some promises that God made long ago to Moses. They are taken from Exodus chapter 6, verses 6 to 8.
Now you can look that passage up at home if you want to, but the promises given in that passage are distilled down into 4 key things, and we've got some actions to go with them, haven't we, to help us remember them. So they are: I will free you, I will deliver you, I will redeem you, and I will restore you, or I will make you mine. Okay? I will free you, I will deliver you, I will redeem you, and I will make you mine, or restore you.
Each promise is represented by a cup of wine. And now we drink the first cup. The cup of freedom and celebration. So I need to pour this out. Can you do that, Emily?
There we go.
Your glass?
We just have a little bit because there are 4 cups and you need to recharge each time. So, drink as much as you like. We're going to have a little bit to start with. There we go.
So this drink is a symbol of joy and celebration. As we drink, we thank God for this opportunity to gather together to observe this festival of Passover, just as God's people have done for centuries before us. God's first promise is, I will free you.
I will free you.
We remember how God brought his people out from being slaves.
We celebrate the freedom God brings. We bless you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who gives us the fruit of the vine. Okay. Now the next part involves the youngest child of the household. It's very important to remember that the history of God's people is a story that is told across the generations. And so the youngest child is going to ask some questions. So Emily's going to ask some questions for us, aren't you, about what we're eating and why on this particular night.
Why do we only eat special flatbread on this night?
We eat flatbread because we remember that Moses and the Israelites were in such a hurry to get out of Egypt that they didn't have time to let their bread dough rise.
Now we've broken our pieces of bread into 3 pieces because you'll need 3 different moments where you eat bread, and this is the first of them. So this is remembering the unleavened bread of the Israelites.
Thank you.
Bread that didn't have time to rise as they rushed out of Egypt. Now you can eat that gradually if you want to. We've got some hummus there that you can dip it in. But Emily's actually going to ask her second question for now. You can eat it in a moment.
Why do we eat bitter herbs?
Why do we eat bitter herbs? We've got some bitter herbs on our Seder plate. We've got some horseradish and we've got some lettuce. And we eat these to remind us that the Israelites were very sad, very bitter in Egypt because of the Pharaoh, the king, who had made them all work very hard as slaves. So I'm going to put a little bit of horseradish into a lettuce leaf, and I'm going to give that to people. There's some horseradish and a lettuce leaf. And there's some horseradish and a lettuce leaf for me. And I'm going to give you a lettuce leaf without horseradish because I don't think I like it very much. Okay.
What's the next question?
Why do we dip our food?
We dip our food in salt water to remember the tears of the Israelite slaves. So you can take a bit of parsley.
Some parsley that you can dip. Now the parsley is going to stand for something else for us in a little while as well. So you can keep a bit of it on your plate, but it's one of the obvious things to dip. It does taste a bit salty when it's dipped in salt water. You don't have to eat it if you don't want to. You could also dip the egg later when you come to eating that if you wanted to.
Very good.
Lovely. What's your next question, Emily?
Yeah, dip it.
Okay.
Make it nice and salty.
You don't have to eat it if you don't want to.
Why do we eat leaning on our side?
Why do we eat leaning on our side? It's traditional to lean or recline to the left during a Passover meal. We lean on our side to remember that once the Israelites were slaves in Egypt, but now they are free people with time to relax, I guess. So this plate tells us the story of God's people being rescued from slavery in Egypt. There's a few things on there that we have missed out so far. There's some haricet. This is the apple and sultana mix, which is deliberately supposed to look a bit like mud once it's been soaked in the red wine. It looks a little bit like mud, okay? If you remember in Egypt, what did the Israelites have to do? They had to make bricks out of mud without straw. So this reminds us of the mud that the Israelites had to use to make bricks in Egypt. And you can do something quite clever with it. You can make a little sandwich using your bread if you've got some left, or with your lettuce leaf if you want to. Yeah, there you go. Haricet and your lettuce leaf. Okay? So that's to remind you of the bricks and mortar of the Israelite slaves. We've also got a lamb bone on our plate. Now this actually comes at the end of another part of the story, isn't it? When Pharaoh had the slaves had the Israelites in slavery in Egypt, Moses and Aaron went to him quite a few times to beg him, let God's people go. And every time he would say no. And so God did something rather clever. God sent a plague. Every time Pharaoh said no, there would be another plague slightly worse. We've clearly drunk our first cup of wine a bit more quickly than we needed to. But this kind of comes with the second cup anyway, so it's alright, we can recharge them now. And what you need to do is to dip your finger, I hope you washed your hands, is dip your finger in the cup of wine, and we're going to flick away those plagues that the Egyptians and the Israelites experienced every time the Pharaoh said no.
Ooh.
So the first plague was blood. Nile turned to blood. Frogs.
Frogs.
Lice.
Lice.
Flies. death of all the animals, boils, hail, locusts, maybe I shouldn't have worn white, darkness, and death of the firstborn. And that is where our lamb shank bone, or stone in our instance, that's where our lamb shank bone comes in. Because that final plague was the most terrible of them all. God was so fed up with Pharaoh saying no that he decided to do something that Pharaoh couldn't possibly ignore. He said that the angel of death would come to Egypt and every firstborn child in the Egyptians' households would die. And the only way that the Israelites were going to be saved was if they did as God told them. They trusted in him. And they had to kill a lamb. And they had to wipe the blood, this is the other place your parsley comes in, they had to wipe the blood of that lamb around their doorposts as a symbol that they were trusting in God and that the angel of death should pass over their homes. So that lamb shank bone becomes a symbol of a substitute that was provided for the death of the firstborn children. Now what else have we got left on our set of plate? We've got an egg, haven't we? Now for the Israelites, the egg was a symbol of mourning. We might remember mourning and sadness at the slavery of Egypt. We might remember mourning and sadness as a result of the death of the firstborn children. Or we might think about mourning and sadness as a result of the destruction of the temple in AD 70. And it's because of the destruction of the temple that we don't have lamb at our Passover meal. Jesus would have had lamb, but the Jews don't anymore. They're waiting for a temple in which they can sacrifice that lamb anew. Now, as Christians, we also believe that Jesus was like the true temple, don't we? We believe that he came back to life after 3 days, rebuilding the temple, as he put it. And so the egg can be a symbol of new life for us, the way that it is at Easter. So as Christians, as we celebrate this Jewish celebration, there's perhaps a bit more story to add on top of it.
And this brings us to our second cup. So we've already recharged our glasses. The second cup is the cup of rescue and deliverance.
Do you remember the action for this one?
God's second promise is, I will deliver you.
Bring you up, deliver you.
I will deliver you. We remember how God delivered his people from Pharaoh's hands.
We celebrate the deliverance
God brings. We bless you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who gives us the fruit of the vine. Cheers.
Now the next part you might think we should have done at the beginning, but this is where it comes, okay? The next part is about hand washing. So I'm going to get our bowl of water. And this is the part where in John's Gospel we're told that Jesus would have gone round and washed his disciples' feet. Those smelly, dusty, sandy, sweaty feet that have been walking the streets of Jerusalem. And Jesus did this as a servant to his disciples. Thank you. We're going to wash our hands rather than our feet. You can start washing people's feet if you'd like to, but I think our hands probably need washing more than our feet. I've been wearing shoes and socks all day. There you go, if you dip your hands in there. You want to do Daddy's hands for him?
Shall I come round to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Now wash Daddy's hands. Now, there's the towel. Okay,
Thank you very much.
well done. You take the towel as well. There we are. Alright. Well done. Now, when you've washed your hands, it's time for the second piece of bread. And this second piece of bread reminds us of the Passover lamb. So the Passover lamb is already a substitute in a way for the firstborn son that didn't need to die because the lamb died. And then the bread becomes a form of substitute for us for the Passover lamb. So with this bread, we remember the way in which the Israelites were saved. So I'm going to break off a piece and give it to everybody. You can eat it now, or you can eat it in a moment if you like. Have a little piece now. And it's engrossed in her egg. Is it a good egg? Good. Now we do something quite special with the third piece of bread. This is quite fun. Okay, this piece of bread is called the afikomen, which means what is to come. All right, And I'm going to fold this piece of bread up in a piece of cloth, just serviette or something if you like, it's just to keep it clean really. And I'm going to ask David to go and hide that, okay? Something is to come, but we don't know what it is yet. Now Emily, you need to close your eyes, okay? Because Emily's going to look for this later, so go and hide the African for us, okay? You'll have to see where Daddy's heading now, won't you? Okay, hidden?
Here it is.
Right, okay, you can open your eyes again. We wait for it for now, don't look for it yet. We have to wait and look for it after we've eaten our main course. And that's what you can do now if you want to. We're not going to eat our main meal now, we're going to do that once we've done the symbolic side of things for you. But normally this is the point in the meal, after the hand washing, at which you would eat your main meal. So if you want to press pause on YouTube, you can press pause if you want to, and come back to us after you've done that. Maybe during your main meal you'd like to discuss perhaps some of the symbols that you've seen on the table. Think about maybe things that they've meant to you that you hadn't thought of before. The other thing that often happens at Passover meals is that people tell a lot of jokes to each other. Does anyone know any good jokes?
I've got one. What kind of man was Boaz before he got married?
What kind of man was Boaz before he got married?
You'll never guess.
Go on.
Ruthless. Did you get it?
Oh dear. It's a definitive Jad joke, isn't it? Ruthless. Get it? Yeah. Boaz was married to Ruth. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. We're going to assume that you've eaten your main meal at this point, and we are going to rejoin you. Okay? And we start after the main course with looking for that piece of bread that we hid earlier. Okay? So you need to go off, Emily, see if you can work out where Daddy might have hidden the afikoman and find it and bring it back. Okay? Under there? No. Where else could it be? He's hidden it well.
Good hunting.
Lots of
Keep
possible hiding places,
going.
aren't there?
Keep going. Oh,
We
we're
found
getting
it.
warmer.
Yay!
There we are. Well done.
We found the afikoman. We've discovered what is to come, and it is bread. Now, there's something very special about this piece of bread, because this, the what is to come bread, is the piece that Jesus would have taken after the meal and broken. Would you like to do that for us? So, can you remember what Jesus said as he broke it? What did he say?
Jesus said, "This is my body broken for you all. Eat it to remember me."
Thank you.
Thank you.
There we go, a piece for you as well. And that's what forms the basis of our communion meal, or the start of it. And the second part is coming up.
Sorry, my mouth's full. Then we come to the third cup, and we need to recharge glasses for this. So, Caroline, can you
Grape juice.
top up
Okay.
Emily's glass, and I'll give us a bit more. So this is the third cup. The third cup is the cup of redemption. And here, Jesus took the cup, explaining that this cup represented a new promise, sealed no longer by the blood of the Passover lamb, which had redeemed the firstborn children, but by his own blood, which would redeem us all. God's third promise, can you remember the actions for this? God's third promise is, I will redeem you.
Like Jesus' arms stretched out on the cross.
We remember how God purchased back his people, once with the blood of the Passover lambs, but forever with the blood of Jesus Christ.
We celebrate the redemption that
yeah.
Jesus brings, and we drink this in remembrance of him. We bless you, Lord our God, King of the universe,
who gives us the fruit of the vine.
And at this point, there would have been a bit more conversation. Maybe they'd have had dessert. I don't know if you've got dessert for yourselves. This is the point at which you can maybe have it. But this is the point in Jesus' Last Supper version of the Passover where certain discussions ensued, and there were a few arguments, a few debates. Who was going to be the greatest? All sorts of things the disciples decided were important to discuss. And it's also the point at which Jesus started to get a little bit somber and started to say, actually, there are some things going to happen which aren't going to be happy. And it's the point at which poor Judas was told, the one who dips at the same table as me is the one who is going to betray me. The one who dips in the bowl of salt water or hummus is going to be the one who will betray me. And Judas knew that it was him. And Judas later would be devastated, but at this point he went off quietly to do what he had to do. He went off to find the soldiers and make sure Jesus was arrested. And it's also the point where Jesus spoke to Peter and warned him of that dreadful moment that he would experience by the charcoal fire, when he would say, I don't know him, 3 times before the cock crowed. So it was a bit of a sombre moment in the disciples' meal. But that was the last section of the meal, really, before we come to the final cup.
Yep, so the fourth and final cup, the cup of restoration. So let's recharge glasses one more time.
Okay.
Don't worry if you don't feel a need to recharge, but obviously we're moving slightly quicker through this meal than sometimes.
That's true.
So the fourth cup, the cup of restoration, God's fourth promise is a covenant promise with his people. I will take you as my people and I will be your God.
Okay. I'll take you as my people. Yeah.
This is the hug action.
Yeah.
We remember how God made a covenant with us and made us his people.
We celebrate the restoration God brings. We bless you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who gives us the fruit of the vine. After the meal, we're told in Matthew's Gospel that Jesus and his disciples sing a hymn, a psalm. It would have been a psalm. We're told that they sing a hymn, and they went out to the Mount of Olives after that, where Jesus would be betrayed and arrested. Now, it was traditional to sing Psalms 115 to 118 after a Passover meal, so we thought that rather than singing on camera for you, which could be absolutely ghastly, that we would read part of Psalm 118 together. Okay? Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever.
When hard pressed, I cried to the Lord. He brought me into a spacious place.
The Lord is with me. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me?
The Lord is my strength and my defence. He has become my salvation.
Open for me the gates of the righteous. I will enter and give thanks to the Lord.
This is the gate of the Lord, through which the righteous may enter.
The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone.
The Lord has done this, and it is marvellous in our eyes.
The Lord is God, and he has made his light shine on us.
With bows in hand, join in the festal procession up to the horns of the altar.
You are my God, and I will praise you. You are my God, and I will exalt you.
Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good.
His love endures forever.
Amen. Jesus knew what was to come, and yet he was still able to rejoice in the enduring love of his Father. So the Passover is a meal that stands for a celebration of all that's past of God's people, of Israel's history, and it also stands for hope for the future, hope that is offered to us through the body and the blood of Jesus, who is the ultimate Passover lamb. And so it ends with a great saying. It ends by saying, next year in Jerusalem. Amen.
Jesus said, this is my body broken for you all. Eat it to remember me.
Broken for me, broken for you. The body of Jesus, broken for you.
A reminder that you're welcome to join us for Good Friday worship and reflections, 12 o'clock tomorrow, 12 o'clock midday. Join us Good Friday, and then on Easter Sunday we'll be broadcasting a dawn service at 6 a.m. and our Sunday morning Easter celebration at 10:30 a.m.